So I got this 365 GT 2+2 at my shop. It came in because the owner said that he had a problem one day driving it, and it just all of a sudden seemed to have lost power, and called me on the phone, and we tried to diagnose it, and I tried to first figure out if it was ignition or fuel, because as they say, starting a car, it's either spark. There's three things that make a car start: spark, fuel, and compression. Engine is fine, you know, as far as compression, so I figured that wouldn't be the problem. So it's usually fuel or spark. And with his diagnosis, which we can go over when he was on the phone, I kind of narrowed it down to fuel. So I had my suspicions, but we really couldn't diagnose it with him at his house, so he sent it to me. And I tried to take it out and run it up to temperature so that I could get to kind of duplicate his issues. So what he said was he took it out for a drive and got it nice and warm, and then all of a sudden he just seemed to lose power, which normally to me, that I think it's kind of vapor lock, but I suspected it, but also wanted to make sure that the fuel pump was working, because on this 365 there's two fuel pumps, and one is a mechanical pump and one is electric pump. This particular 365, they still run both of them, and later ones they started to run just the mechanical fuel pump, or the electric fuel pump rather, and get rid of the mechanical. So I wanted to show you what's going on, because I finally got it to do what I wanted it to do, which was basically the A switch is the fuel pump. So I turn it off, and it should run with the electric pump. Now if you look, the water temperature is getting up there. The electric fans are on. I can hear them running. You can see that the oil temperature is up too. It's kind of idling okay, but every time I step on the gas, it responds. He was saying that he was starting to get hesitation. So what usually happens is when there's vapor lock issues, the fuel, there's not enough fuel in the carburetor bowl. So the first sign is that it doesn't get acceleration. So here you can just start to hear it. As I'm starting to step on the gas, there's no response. It's starting to stumble. See, now I'm stepping on the gas here. See? And it just stalled on me. So the way I check to see if it's true, I turn the key off, just for now so I can talk. So it basically stalled. It was idling fine. It would respond to the throttle, and it would accelerate. But what happens is the fuel bowls start to run dry. All of a sudden, when you step on the accelerator pump, you're not getting that squirt of fuel, and then you can feel that the car is kind of starved. That's like a sign of the fact that the fuel bowls are going empty. Well, why is the fuel bowl going empty? There's two possibilities. One is that there's vapor lock, and the mechanical pump can't keep up, because I have the mechanical pump running on itself. I don't have the electric pump going, and so what's happening is the mechanical pump can't keep up, because there's the fuel in the lines is starting to turn into vapor because it's too hot in the engine compartment. With the fuel running, with the electric fans running and everything else, it just starts to overheat the engine compartment, and the fuel inside the steel line starts to boil over. So what I do to check that is I'm going to turn the key on, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the electric pump. So if the electric pump is working, you can hear also in the background that the electric fans are still running, because the engine's running, you know, a little warm. It's not, the key's on, but it's just the electric fans are going to run. But what I'm doing now is I'm letting the fuel pump, the electric pump, fill up the fuel bowls, because now that they're empty, I'm going to give the electric pump a little bit of time. And that should be enough time for it to pump fuel into the fuel bowls, fill up all three carburetors. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start. And now all of a sudden, it's just like the fuel pump is just filling it up. See, it's still not there. So what I'm going to do, I suspect that this fuel pump is not, even the electric pump is kind of having a little bit of issues, because that should have filled it by now. So I'm going to give it a few more seconds and make sure. I'm just going to let the fuel pump run. Like I said, I have the A button on, or the electric fuel pump on. Give it a few more seconds. It should have filled by now, but I suspect that this fuel pump is just not running enough flow. We may have to just put a new fuel pump in anyway. All right, so now it should start. So see, now it's responding because I've given the fuel pump enough time to fill the bowls. But I suspect it's still not 100% because I can feel one of the, yeah, you see, still not enough there. So I'm gonna pull it into the shop. I'm gonna put it up in the air, take a look at how things are routed, make sure there's nothing else that's clogging it. One of the other ideas I wanna do is, since the car is here and I looked at the invoicing, I haven't changed the fuel filter in a while either. So we could be fighting a couple things. I think it's not a bad idea to pull a fuel filter in the back and just check to see if anything's clogged in there. We can also have a restriction because you know, if you have a clogged fuel filter, if you have a weak fuel pump, I mean, every little step of the way kind of makes this car a little bit harder to start when you have fuel issues as far as like vapor locking and everything. So I want to just go through this system a little bit. I haven't really gone through every single bit of it. Car ran pretty well when it came with me in the fall, but now that it's starting to get a little bit warmer, let's just go through this a little bit and get it going. But that's kind of what I suspected, is that the fuel bowls were kind of running dry, and they are. So let's go to the next step and figure out what's going on. All right, so let me show you what I got. First thing I want to do is check the fuel flow on the fuel filter, or the rear fuel line. This rear line on a Ferrari is comes from the electric fuel pump. So, and the front one, the mechanical pump, is kind of down below, comes up through this regulator and then across here. So you basically have a fuel rail that runs from one side to the other, fueling the 3 carburetors. So first thing I want to do is just check flow. We can hear, I'll turn on the fuel pump. Ignition on. You can see that the switch is on, and I think if you listen carefully, you can hear the fuel pump kind of running. So I go out here and there's no flow. So I think we have a bad fuel pump. Now we had checked this before and it was working, but it must just be going bad now that it's running, and just you know, it's one of those things where it just kind of goes. So we definitely know that it's the fuel pump, that the rear fuel pump is not doing well. So I'm going to put this up in the air and take a look and see what we got in the back. Turn this off first. Okay, let me show you what I got. So this is the back of the car, and there's the fuel canister, and behind it, I don't know if you can see that. Let me see if I can get underneath here. Behind it is the fuel pump. All right, so took the fuel pump, or the fuel filter out, changed it out, put a new one in, changed all the gaskets, and pulled the old pump out. Here's the old one, and then just basically transferred the fuel fittings from this one to this guy. The new pump came with new elbows, but the difference is the outlet pipes are a little bit smaller. So just to keep things consistent, not to change anything, I just transferred these elbow fittings. Of course, they're tapered pipe fittings on this fuel pump, so I put a little bit of Teflon tape just to make sure that it seals nice and tight. You know, tapered pipe fittings should fit pretty well, but it always helps to put a little Teflon tape on there just to make things work right. Put the corresponding connector on there so that would work, and so ready to put it back in the car. Well, with a new fuel pump installed, electric fuel pump, I can test it, and I'll show you. You can see now that there's flow. So now I can test the mechanical pump. I'm going to show you how to check to make sure that the mechanical pump is working. So basically what I do is I take Just move this out of the way a little bit. What I do is I take the fuel line off the front. This is this yellow line right here, and I disconnect it from the front of the rail, and I have a fitting here that I put on here with a hose clamp and a plug. So I just plug this side up. So basically I can run the car off the electric pump, which I fixed. I mean, I now have fuel coming off the back from the electric pump, and that's feeding the fuel rail. When it's plugged up on this side, it'll still fill the carburetors, but it'll run the mechanical pump too. But what I've done is I've disconnected the mechanical pump and I'm feeding it into this container. So I'm going to show you that when I start the car quickly, that the mechanical pump is actually filling fuel. It's actually got pretty good pressure, and that's why I'm pretty sure it's a vapor lock issue, because if it's cold, right now the engine's cold and everything's running and it's filling the fuel bowls with the mechanical pump, but what happens is when things warm up, it doesn't pump as well. So let me see if I can lock this thing down and I can actually start the engine and you can see it pumping. Fuel pump is installed. It's time to take the car out for a drive, get some temperature going, and make sure that it's not vapor locking anymore. Kind of a humid day, and just going to try to get some temperature going in this car. Alright, let's get some temperature going in this car. Anyway, so I've noticed a lot of these cars have been having vapor lock issues. So it's one of these things where I think it's just going to be a common occurrence. Warm days, even though we're at sea level, the warm days are just causing the fuel to boil up in the carburetors and boil up in the fuel lines. So you really got to make sure that the fuel system is in optimal operating condition, or you're going to have problems with driving. I mean, right now when the airflow is moving through the engine compartment and it's keeping things relatively cool, it's fine. But what happens is you'll get stuck in some traffic, or you'll pull over to get some gas and stop the car, and it'll heat soak, and it's just from, you know, the exhaust headers are hot, the engine is hot, and everything just kind of sits and it's like sitting over a radiator, and everything else starts to get hot. All the under hood temperatures start to rise, and then because the fuel is right on the limit of boiling already, and you just gave it a couple more degrees for it to boil over, and that's what happens, and then all of a sudden you can't start the car. You know, there's no fuel, there's no fluid inside the lines for the fuel pump to actually work. As you saw, the mechanical pump was working, you know, when there's fuel, liquid fuel in the pump, but once that liquid fuel turns into a vapor inside the pump, which the pump is bolted to the engine, so the pump is just as warm as the rest of the engine. So when you put that pump next to the engine and let it heat soak, all the fuel inside the fuel pump turns to vapor, and the mechanical pump can't pump vapor. So the solution is to add a fuel pump, which Ferrari basically did, by this era of car, was to put a modern fuel pump that can run all the time. But if you circulate the fuel and you're constantly putting cool fuel into the fuel line, it'll have a less chance of it boiling over. So that's kind of what you have to do. And with older cars, adding that second fuel pump really helps. Well, we're stuck behind somebody, as usual. Hoping this road was going to be a fun road to drive, but that's what happens. But why go 5 miles below the speed limit? I don't get it. So what I want to do now is, now that I've gotten everything kind of up to temp, I'm going to let it sit here for a little bit and just watch temperatures kind of climb a little bit. And see if it'll have issues. That's the water temp starting to get a little hotter. To rev it a little bit. No, I just heard the electric fans kick on. So that means the engine is warming up. Everything should be hot. Now what's happening is, as the electric fans turn on, hot air is now blowing onto the engine because it's kind of like a puller fan or pusher fan. No, it's a puller fan. So it's pulling air into the engine compartment, which will kind of heat everything else up. So if it's going to stall, like we had before, see, and it's still pretty reactive. That means all three carburetors have fuel in them. All right, well, that's it. Basically, I think solved it, fixed the problem. You know, it was electric fuel pump, a little bit of vapor lock, and that's ready. The car's ready to go home. thanks for watching. And please think about commenting or subscribing and all that other good stuff. It really helps the channel kind of grow. Your likes and you know, comments and subscriptions helps get the word out, helps YouTube kind of put it in front of other people. And I think that this kind of content is interesting. I think that there's you know, vintage Ferrari stuff is it's always good to have that stuff out there. So you know, put a like in there and you know, support this channel. Thanks for watching.